Hi, the Layers panel is an essential component of your workspace, so it makes sense to customize it to fit your needs better. I'll use this PSD file that's attached to this lecture, so please follow along. Here's how my Layers panel initially looks. Pretty standard. The first customization option is the thumbnail size. If you right-click any of them, you'll get this following list. Here you can see I have small thumbnails selected, but I have 3 other choices. Let's go through them. No thumbnails simply shows the symbols we previously talked about. This card BG is a shape layer, while BG is a smart object. If I open the ingredients group, we can see this is a raster layer. The reasoning behind this option is the following. Space is very limited in Photoshop. No matter how large your display is, you'll always want more room for your canvas. Any panel whatsoever eats into its space, and thus all professional Photoshop users try to compact everything as much as possible. If I were to use this option, here's how I'd change my interface. I'd move my character panel above it. That's the first step, and you can see how it shrunk in size. I'll also move my properties panel at the top of this column. Now I no longer have to expand them leftwards, which gives me a better view of the canvas. By the way, you can resize this properties panel so it takes up less space. Let me reset my interface back to my previous settings. Going back to the thumbnail size, please note you should right-click in this area. If you go further to the right, you'll get a completely different list of options. If this is unclear, you can also right-click anywhere at the bottom where there's nothing there. Let's change it to large thumbnails, and as you can see, this is quite generous, and it makes more sense if your project only has a few layers. Here, I'd say this is the maximum amount of groups and layers for this particular setting. If you'd have more, you'd just end up scrolling way too much through your layers panel. This is particularly helpful for beginners who constantly forget to rename their layers, and that's because this representation is much improved over the one from smaller thumbnails. But you can further improve it with another fantastic customization option. Focus on this layer called Icon. From its thumbnail, you can barely see anything at the moment. Now I'll right-click any other one and I'll focus on this area. Here I'm currently using Clip Thumbnails to Document Bounds. Let's switch to Clip Thumbnails to Layer Bounds. Now the icon is very easy to see. It's a star, and if we glance over the canvas, we can immediately spot it here in the top left. Plus, I can also see the heart icon from the title and all the other relevant layers. So this customization is fantastic for users who work on projects that only have a few layers. Let me show you why the previous setting is also helpful in certain circumstances. I'll select this star icon and I'll enlarge it dramatically. I'll also make it red so it'll be easier to follow. Now I'll place it somewhere in the top left corner. Notice the thumbnail. Clip Thumbnail to Document Bounds shows me the layers representation considering the size of my canvas. Because I placed it in the top left, the thumbnail is also telling me that. Note that as I move it to the right side, the thumbnail updates itself. Did you notice? Let me do that again, only this time I'll place it at the bottom of my canvas. And there you go. Another cool option is the following. In most projects, you'll duplicate your layers a lot. If I do that now with Ctrl-J, you'll see a new layer has appeared called Icon Copy. I already mentioned that Photoshop allows the same name to be used multiple times, so why not have it called just Icon? Renaming each duplicate layer is tedious work. Here's how you disable that label. Go to the top right of your Layers panel and find this tiny icon. Click it and you'll get this list. Look for Panel Options. From this new window, we can see the same stuff we already talked about, the thumbnail size, the thumbnail contents. But look at this last option, Add Copy to Copied Layers and Groups. By default, it's enabled. Uncheck it and you're good to go. Let's test it out by selecting another layer. Ctrl-J to create a duplicate. As you see, there's no more copy at the end of its name. Okay, one last thing before we finish this lecture. In case you're working on a large project or sometimes temporarily hide some layers, here's how you can keep track of things. If you right-click on the eye symbol next to each layer or group, you'll get the following options. If you click on any of these colors, you'll see that reflected in your Layers panel. You have 7 choices in total, and that's more than enough to sort everything out. In general, I like to use these color codes when I hide some of my layers and I don't want to delete them by accident. This is also helpful when you create hover states. If I want to show how this design would look if it were live, you can duplicate certain groups and color code them, perform various edits and hide them. This is how you can keep track of various states. Okay, that concludes this lecture. Go to your Layers panel and experiment with these options. See which ones fit you best.